There are two kinds of power in this industry. One builds walls, thick, towering barriers designed to protect position, influence, and legacy. It keeps access limited. It controls who rises and who stays beneath the surface. The other builds ladders. It reaches outward, pulling others up, daring the room to climb higher together. For years, quiet conversations behind studio doors and inside boardrooms have framed this as the fundamental difference between Jay-Z and 50 Cent. Jay is described as a closed system, calculated, selective, operating at a level where distance becomes part of the brand. 50, by contrast, moves like gravitational force. He draws energy toward himself, but somehow still leaves space for others to shine in the orbit around him. When people call Jay a legend, and they do without hesitation, there's often a second thought that follows, softer and more complicated. He feels untouchable, elevated, almost unreachable, like standing at street level and staring up at a skyline with no visible doors. The power is impressive, but it's sealed off. 50, on the other hand, is often described as larger than life, yet strangely accessible. A superstar who can laugh loudly, shake hands without calculation, and make a crowded room feel personal. He carries scale without losing presence. And that contrast, distance versus accessibility, matters right now more than ever. Because the story unfolding around them isn't just about reputation or record sales. It's about consequences. The rumor storm sweeping through hip-hop is thick and electric. The narrative gaining traction suggests that Beyoncé may be preparing to step back, or step away entirely, as 50 Cent signals a second wave of a documentary-style exposé centered on Diddy and those connected to him. In the shadow of that possibility, speculation has intensified. Commentators claim Jay-Z and Beyoncé supported Diddy behind the scenes for years, maintaining proximity while the public saw only polished appearances. Now, according to the voices pushing this storyline, that proximity could become liability. And the question being thrown across social media platforms is sharp and unavoidable. If new revelations surface the way people expect, does Beyoncé distance herself from Jay-Z to protect her empire? Or does she retreat from the spotlight altogether before the storm reaches her doorstep? Amid the noise, another industry belief resurfaces like doctrine. Some doors only open when the right image stands in front of them. Some awards only arrive when the narrative aligns with institutional comfort. Critics argue that recognition in entertainment is rarely just about talent. It's about perception, timing, alignment, and power. They point to Jay-Z's evolution as evidence. Once framed as a street titan and competitive force, he eventually became the embodiment of corporate sophistication. The shift was gradual but undeniable. Over time, he was no longer positioned as disruptive. He became foundational, not just an artist but an establishment. That is why a strange story from Las Vegas continues to circulate, not because it can be verified line by line, but because it reinforces the emotional dynamics people already believe. In the retelling, a tense exchange unfolded between Jay-Z and 50 Cent. The atmosphere tightened. Beyoncé, according to the story, reacted instantly, alert, protective, prepared for confrontation before anyone else processed the shift in energy. 50 allegedly found himself caught in a moment he didn't anticipate, unsure how to respond to intensity that felt disproportionate to the conversation. And Jay-Z, rather than escalating or diffusing the situation, appeared detached, observing, measuring, withholding. Whether the specifics are perfectly accurate almost becomes secondary. The story survives because it fits a larger narrative. Beyoncé as fiercely defensive, 50 as unexpectedly entangled, Jay as controlled and silent. It plays less like gossip and more like mythology, each character reinforcing the roles people have already assigned them. And in times like this, perception often carries more weight than proof. Then the narrative turns colder, less rumor, more threat. The new claim circulating is that Jay-Z understands something the public is only beginning to suspect, that 50 Cent is not finished, that the first documentary was not the strike but the warning. And according to those pushing this storyline, Jay believes he may be next. The reason whispered behind studio doors is not gossip or recycled industry beef. It is footage, not speculation, not anonymous tips. Actual recorded material that allegedly places powerful names inside powerful rooms during moments never meant to leave those walls. Commentators repeat a number that feels almost cinematic in scale, more than 140 hours of content, implying that what audiences have seen so far was only a carefully selected fragment. The argument being made is that 50 has subtly indicated there is far more matter than what appeared in the limited Netflix documentary about Diddy. According to this narrative, some of it did not make the final cut, not because it lacked impact, but because platforms have boundaries. Netflix, as a global corporation, has legal exposure to consider. Independent release, however, offers something different: autonomy, control, fewer gatekeepers. If 50 were to release additional material on YouTube or another independent channel, the implication is that he would not be restrained by the same institutional caution. And that is where the fear intensifies. Because the real concern is not just what may exist, it is who controls it, and whether that person is willing to play by anyone else's rules. As the story widens, it leans into something deeply human. Once one voice breaks silence, others begin to measure their own fear differently. Speaking stops feeling reckless and starts feeling necessary. Silence begins to look less like protection and more like participation. The script frames this moment as a potential domino effect, one testimony making the next one easier, each revelation lowering the cost of truth for someone else. It then circles back to the long-standing tension between 50 and Jay-Z, painting their history as more than artistic rivalry. For years, they competed not only through music, but through influence, alliances, and cultural positioning. The narrative suggests Jay-Z has historically protected his space carefully, resisting anyone who threatens to occupy the same altitude. It claims he attempted to block 50 from certain major platforms and opportunities, whether out of competition or caution. Whether every detail of that claim is accurate almost becomes secondary. The thematic message is clear: Jay defends territory, 50 thrives on confrontation. From there, the tone grows heavier. The script moves into allegations about private connections and shared proximity to Diddy during periods now under scrutiny. It suggests Jay-Z and Beyoncé were closer to the inner circle than publicly acknowledged, and that their silence, whether strategic or passive, has now become part of the conversation. The accusations circulating online are serious, and the script presents them as exactly that: circulating allegations, not confirmed findings. But emotionally, this section is not about proving guilt. It is about the idea that powerful ecosystems often protect themselves until the cost of protection outweighs the benefit. The narrative then enters even more sensitive ground, revisiting public debates about Beyoncé and Jay-Z's early relationship. Critics question timelines. They examine age differences. They discuss power imbalance in an industry where access, mentorship, and influence can blur lines that should never be blurred. The script does not claim legal conclusions. Instead, it highlights the discomfort that arises when people look backward and reconsider what was normalized at the time. In this framing, some critics argue Beyoncé may have learned to survive within a system that rewarded silence and loyalty over confrontation. As the lens pulls back again, the possibility emerges that if additional evidence surfaces, more alleged victims or insiders could step forward. The narrative suggests a threshold moment, where what once lived in whispers begins appearing in headlines. Public figures claim they are working with individuals prepared to speak. Social media discourse grows louder. Mainstream outlets begin paying attention. And suddenly, the environment shifts from rumor to reckoning. Throughout all of it, the script emphasizes one central contrast. Diddy built an empire loudly, through spectacle, proximity, constant visibility. He lived in the spotlight. Jay-Z, by comparison, cultivated distance. He limited access. He moved through boardrooms and private spaces rather than crowded stages. One man thrived in visibility, the other mastered controlled absence. And in a world where exposure can either crown or collapse you, the difference between those strategies may now determine who withstands the storm and who doesn't. It also revisits old industry tensions, suggesting that rivalry was not always emotional, it was strategic. According to voices in the narrative, there were moments when Diddy allegedly encouraged friction between Jay-Z and other artists, not because of personal dislike, but because chaos can be useful. In competitive ecosystems, conflict distracts. It divides attention. And when two powerful figures are locked in rivalry, a third can move quietly between them. The idea being floated is simple but sharp. Sometimes instability is not accidental. Sometimes it is engineered. From there, the story challenges the public-facing claim that Jay-Z and Diddy were never truly close. It reframes closeness in industry terms, not sleepover friendship, not daily phone calls, but proximity, shared stages, overlapping business circles, coordinated appearances, and public endorsements that's now alliance without explicitly declaring it. In entertainment power structures, proximity itself becomes currency. Standing beside someone at the right moment can signal alignment, protection, even silent agreement. And in that ecosystem, distance is rarely accidental. It is chosen. Then the narrative shifts into the business layer, where image becomes infrastructure. The script argues that Jay-Z's transformation accelerated after his marriage to Beyoncé. Before that union, he was already a titan in music, but afterward, his brand evolved into something broader, corporate, refined, culturally untouchable. According to this framing, Beyoncé's presence amplified more than his public image. She elevated the optics. She softened the edges that once defined him. She became not just a partner, but a stabilizing force, a shield against criticism, a symbol of legitimacy that reassured mainstream institutions he was not just influential, but acceptable. In this version of events, Beyoncé's power functions as insulation. Her reputation for discipline, artistry, and control over her narrative extended protection to the space around her. And if that insulation cracks, the suggestion is that what lies underneath becomes vulnerable, not because of emotion, but because perception shifts. Once public sentiment turns uncertain, past alliances are re-examined and protection weakens. The documentary thread then returns, more clinical and less theatrical. The script claims Diddy hired a videographer to document his life in granular detail, including behind-the-scenes conversations that allegedly touched on legal strategy. The controversy, according to this storyline, centers on whether some of those conversations were recorded without proper transparency to those involved. From there, the narrative takes a colder turn, suggesting that a business dispute over payment allowed that footage to change hands. Contracts, invoices, ownership rights. In this telling, private material became transferable property once agreements broke down. The damage, if true, was not done through confrontation, it was done through paperwork. At the highest levels, reputations are not broken by fists, they are broken by leverage. Then the stakes return to the marriage. The script suggests Beyoncé may be weighing legacy against loyalty. For years, she has maintained control of her image with almost surgical precision, choosing silence when necessary, choosing public unity when strategic, and allowing time to recalibrate public memory. But the narrative now questions whether even that discipline has limits. If further revelations were to threaten the empire she built, her brand, her business ventures, her cultural influence, the framing suggests she could make a decision not rooted in emotion, but in preservation, not a reaction, a calculation. Finally, the script underscores what makes this moment feel different. It suggests Jay-Z is facing scrutiny from outlets and audiences that are less easily influenced by prior relationships or industry ties. The protective layers that once filtered criticism appear thinner. Mainstream coverage feels less deferential, more probing. And when gatekeepers shift, narratives change. The implication is that this is not just another rumor cycle. It is a structural shift in who controls the conversation. And when control moves, even the most powerful figures must adjust, or risk being redefined by forces they can no longer contain. It also revisits the older power dynamics that shaped the industry long before any documentary cameras started rolling. In this version of events, rivalry was never just about ego or artistic competition. It was about positioning. According to those who study the chessboard of hip-hop history, Diddy allegedly understood that tension could be weaponized. If two dominant figures are locked in visible conflict, their energy is directed at each other. Their focus narrows. Their alliances tighten. And in that distraction, someone else can maneuver quietly in the background. Chaos, in that sense, becomes a ladder. Stir enough friction between giants, and you create space to climb between them. The narrative suggests that Diddy may have encouraged certain competitive narratives around Jay-Z not necessarily out of personal resentment, but out of strategic calculation. In highly competitive ecosystems, perception is power. If one artist appears embattled, if another appears distracted, the third benefits. And so, what once looked like random industry tension begins to resemble something more deliberate when viewed through that lens. Not personal grudges, but positioning. Not emotional reactions, but long-term plays. From there, the story confronts the claim that Jay-Z and Diddy were never truly close. The public-facing narrative in recent years has leaned toward distance, suggesting limited connection beyond surface-level industry overlap. But critics of that framing argue something different. They point to SH. Art stages, joint appearances, business proximity, and moments of public familiarity. In an industry built on optics, standing beside someone carries meaning. Appearances are rarely accidental. Invitations are rarely casual. Access is curated. In that world, closeness does not have to look like friendship in the everyday sense. It does not require sleepovers, constant calls, or emotional intimacy. It requires proximity. And proximity in entertainment circles often equals protection. Being seen together signals alignment. It communicates that alliances exist, even if unspoken. It suggests mutual benefit. And once the public starts reevaluating one member of that circle, everyone who stood within its radius becomes part of the conversation. Then the lens shifts to branding, the quiet architecture behind celebrity power. The script argues that Jay-Z's public evolution accelerated dramatically after marrying Beyoncé. Before that chapter, he was already a dominant figure in music, respected and feared in equal measure. But afterward, the narrative surrounding him broadened. He was no longer just a rap mogul. He became part of a cultural power couple, a symbol of Black excellence packaged for both community pride and mainstream comfort. According to this framing, Beyoncé's influence extended beyond partnership. She reshaped optics. Her image, disciplined, controlled, relentlessly curated, brought a stabilizing force to the brand they shared. She was not simply standing beside him, she amplified him. Institutions that once viewed him through the lens of aggressive entrepreneurship began to see him as refined, elevated, safe for boardrooms and billionaire brunches. The shift was subtle but powerful. He moved from being disruptive to being foundational. In this interpretation, Beyoncé became a shield as much as a spouse. Her reputation insulated him from criticism in ways that business acumen alone could not. Her legacy functioned as a credibility stamp, softening public suspicion and reinforcing an image of legitimacy. And that is precisely why the stakes feel so high in the current narrative. If that shield fractures, if public trust in her brand wavers, the insulation weakens. And once insulation weakens, scrutiny penetrates more easily. The documentary thread then re-enters the story, stripped of spectacle and framed through the mechanics of ownership. The claim is that Diddy hired a videographer to document his life in granular detail, potentially including conversations tied to legal strategy. The controversy arises not from the existence of cameras, because cameras follow celebrities constantly, but from the question of consent and disclosure. Were all parties aware? Were private conversations recorded in spaces where confidentiality was expected? These are the kinds of details that move a story from gossip into legal territory. The script further suggests that a financial dispute, allegedly involving unpaid invoices or contractual breakdowns, allowed that footage to change hands. In this telling, private content became leverage, ownership shifted, and what was once intended as controlled narrative material allegedly transformed into exposure risk. At the highest levels of business and entertainment, damage rarely comes through dramatic confrontation. It arrives through documentation, through signatures, through clauses. Through the cold language of contracts that determine who controls the narrative. This is where the tone becomes almost surgical, because reputations at that level are not destroyed by shouting matches. They are dismantled by ownership rights. If someone else legally holds the material that shapes your story, your power shifts overnight. Then the focus tightens once more on the marriage. The script portrays Beyoncé as someone who has spent decades mastering the art of image control. Every appearance calculated, every silence strategic, every public statement deliberate. She endured public betrayal once before and chose unity over collapse, reframing pain into empowerment. That decision strengthened her brand rather than weakening it. But endurance, as the script suggests, is not infinite. In this framing, the question she faces now is not romantic. It is structural. If further revelations threaten not just her personal life, but her empire, her business ventures, endorsements, partnerships, legacy projects, the calculus changes. Loyalty may compete with preservation. The script implies that she could weigh the long-term cost of remaining aligned against the cost of separation. And if separation protects the empire she built, that option becomes strategic rather than emotional. Adding to that tension is the idea that Jay-Z is facing a type of scrutiny unfamiliar to him. For years, the narrative around him was largely shaped within circles where influence mattered, media relationships, cultural gatekeepers, platforms that benefited from proximity. But the script suggests this moment feels different. Mainst. Ream outlets appear less hesitant. Questions feel sharper. The usual buffers seem thinner. When gatekeepers shift, narratives accelerate. When influence weakens, silence becomes louder. And when a story can no longer be managed through familiar channels, control starts to slip. That is the underlying tension driving this entire arc. Not simply whether allegations are true or false, but whether the machinery that once protected certain figures is still intact. In the end, the expansion of this narrative is less about one documentary or one rivalry. It is about power systems being tested, about proximity becoming liability, about branding colliding with accountability, and about whether insulation built carefully over decades can withstand a moment where documentation, public pressure, and shifting media dynamics converge at once. As the narrative moves toward its most combustible territory, the tone shifts from speculation to something far heavier. The script suggests that beyond the material already released, there may be additional footage that allegedly contains conversations or actions tied to possible witness interference. The claims circulating online include accusations of bribery, obstruction of justice, and intimidation, supposedly involving someone close to Diddy's inner circle. A specific name, Neil, is repeatedly referenced in connection with a public statement from a former associate who alleged that sensitive information was shared in ways that could have placed witnesses at risk. It is important to understand the gravity of what is being alleged here. Witness interference, if proven in a court of law, is not scandal. It is criminal exposure. These claims are being discussed publicly, but they remain allegations unless substantiated through legal proceedings. The script treats them as part of an expanding conversation rather than established facts. Yet the emotional temperature of the narrative rises precisely because the implications are so serious. Once a story moves from reputational damage to potential obstruction, it no longer lives in the realm of entertainment gossip. It enters legal territory, and legal territory carries consequences that cannot be managed through branding alone. What makes this phase of the narrative particularly volatile is the speed at which it appears to be growing. Social media posts, interview clips, online commentary, all feeding into one another, amplifying the sense that something larger is unfolding. The script emphasizes how quickly whispers can turn into headlines, and how headlines can attract scrutiny from institutions that operate beyond the entertainment ecosystem. In this framing, the concern is not just what may have happened, but who may be pulled into the investigation if the allegations gain traction. Then the story pivots to a familiar pattern that often emerges in high-profile controversies. When accusations threaten powerful figures, attention frequently shifts toward the person revealing or amplifying the claims. The messenger becomes the focus. Motives are dissected. Past rivalries are revisited. Personal grudges are highlighted. According to the script, 50 Cent is experiencing exactly that reaction. Critics question whether his actions are driven by truth-seeking or by long-standing competition. The narrative suggests that it is easier for observers to scrutinize his intentions than to confront the possibility that the allegations themselves may have substance. At the same time, the script introduces a detail designed to complicate the revenge narrative. It references claims that 50 Cent is allegedly collaborating in some capacity with Diddy's own son on aspects of the documentary project. If accurate, that detail alters the framing. A purely personal vendetta would not typically involve partnership with a family member of the subject. The script uses this element to argue that the project may be positioned as documentation rather than retaliation, though it stops short of declaring that as fact. Instead, it presents it as part of the broader public discourse surrounding the unfolding situation. As the tension builds, the focus returns to Beyoncé, not as a background figure, but as a central decision-maker in a moment of uncertainty. The script portrays her as someone who has spent decades constructing a carefully controlled empire. Her brand is not accidental. It is engineered through discipline, silence when necessary, and strategic visibility when beneficial. She has weathered public storms before, choosing unity over fracture and transforming personal turmoil into artistic narrative. That resilience strengthened her image rather than weakening it. But this moment, the script implies, may test the limits of that strategy. If further revelations surface, if additional footage emerges that reshapes public perception, she may face a calculation unlike any before. The question becomes less about personal loyalty and more about long-term preservation. Does she remain aligned and absorb the fallout, trusting that time and discipline can once again recalibrate the narrative? Or does she distance herself to protect the infrastructure she has built? Business ventures, endorsements, partnerships, and legacy projects that extend far beyond music. The framing here is deliberate. It is not about heartbreak. It is about brand architecture. When your identity functions as both art and enterprise, every association carries weight. And if that association becomes liability, the cost-benefit equation shifts rapidly. Finally, the script circles back to the unresolved uncertainty at the center of it all. If 50 truly possesses additional footage, material not yet seen by the public, who else might be implicated? How far does proximity extend? How many names exist within the radius of what may eventually surface? The unanswered questions are what give the narrative its momentum. Because once the possibility of exposure is introduced, the imagination fills in the blanks faster than confirmation ever could. The story as presented feels unfinished, not because it lacks drama, but because it lacks resolution. Allegations remain allegations. Footage remains unseen. Decisions remain unannounced. And until facts replace speculation, the tension will continue to build in the space between what is known and what is feared. The conversation is still evolving. The public is still watching. And whatever unfolds next may redefine not only individual reputations, but the broader architecture of influence surrounding them.